And it's funny, you say the exact same thing that we had these guys, Saucy.co, they're sort of the preeminent company at when it comes to sort of e-commerce product sourcing, whether it's components and parts, product R&D, supply chain sort of setup. They're at sort of the front end of what you guys eventually do. Obviously, you're at the bigger end of supply chains, and they're at that sort of R&D initial stage. So they'll get a lot of brands like yourself, like, you know, the Kmarts of the world who reach out to prototype a product, and they're at that sort of testing stage. And I was speaking to them about the fact, you know, where their business is and where yours is. I think it's so funny that you both come in weeks apart. Like, they were literally in last week, you know. They've had massive growth like yourself in the last year, I'd say. So I think there was the acquisition, which we can touch on later. Employees at 150. You've got 11 to 12 different service lines, distribution center design, network and design strategy, freight optimization, warehouses, offshore supply chain, land acquisition, portfolio. Like, there's just so much there. And we're at a really pivotal moment for Australia in terms of where supply chains are heading, just because of what has happened during COVID.
Sure. Yeah.
There's the usual chatter about people saying, oh, we've got to move away from China, we've got to focus on this country. And I found it really illuminating during their conversation where they said the reality is that things will probably continue largely as they are in terms of raw goods. You know, like you can only go to China for electronics, batteries, and certain plastics. It's just not going to change.
Yeah.
And you can get some components from India and so forth, and that's totally fine. But what has changed is that supply chain innovation, which is where you guys are at. And I think you spoke about in an interview about this hub and spoke model, which the majors have sort of cottoned on to, I think, in the last couple of years.
For sure, yeah.
So I was curious, from your perspective, what are the sort of key headwinds and tailwinds for e-commerce plus supply chains in the next 5 years, say?
Yeah, I think we've sort of caused a bit of it ourselves. So, you know, Australia and what we've also been doing, we've really focused in on leaning out supply chain so that you can buy a T-shirt at Kmart for $1, you know, like, and how the hell do you get a T-shirt for $1? Well, you cut money out of every part of the process, but you lean it out. So you have a resource that's expensive touching it once, and that's at the store. And you know, you're really thinking about how you deliver it, whereas I guess e-commerce requires something totally different to that. So we've gone from this really lean out supply chain to now needing flexible supply chains that have inventory at every location that someone needs it. So the consumer has changed, and that's causing massive disruption on supply chains. And then you look at, okay, well, where are we focused? Well, everyone went and focused in on China and went and put all their manufacturing in China, raw products in China, set up distribution networks out of southern China to come into Australia, did it by state, regionalised it. So we did all of those things. And now we go, okay, well, we need product when we need it, but there's a 5-month lead time to get that T-shirt from Bangladesh through China back out. And the consumer doesn't like red anymore. They like green. It's just changed over the last, few seconds. So we talk about the lean supply chain becoming the agile supply chain. And you don't just go and throw away all the things that you've worked on over the last 10 years, but you are going to have to think a little bit differently. And COVID then supersized it. COVID accelerated 5 or 6 years worth of growth into 3 or 4 months. And yes, people like Kmart, who's a client of ours, we were halfway through their next generation and got stopped and said, right, now work on these sort of parameters.
Do you worry that that's a potential short-sighted mistake though? Because I get what you're saying. So basically it sounds like the opportunity cost of not having as much stock there stored in a warehouse grew massively during COVID because of what happened to global supply chains.
Yeah.
But do you worry at all that if things sort of start turn back to normal, that people have then completely changed their designs, their entire setup for something that may only be a short-term occurrence, or do you think it is always going to be in our generation's head for the next couple of decades?
Yeah, I think we're forever changed, not to the level that COVID took us to, but I think the consumer has changed. So the consumer now wants it however the hell they can get it, right? And and they're more demanding than ever. You know, back in the day, the retailer determined what the consumer got and when they got it. Now the consumer, if you haven't got it where I need it, how I need it, I'm going somewhere else. And then that was already coming. I mean, if you looked at JD.com in China, they could deliver anywhere in the world in 48 hours. So you imagine, and then you go to, I won't say a name because they might be a client, but you go to such and such and buy a slab of beer online, and it takes 7 days to get to your house. You sort of go, how's that good customer service? So I think we demand a lot more. Same day, next day is now necessary. Like if you buy, we're doing work with a well-known shoe manufacturer and clothing manufacturer, and we actually bought a product from them and then showed them how long it took to get to Australia, and it went via the US, you know, and sort of said, here's the number one issue. If I'm waiting for a top-end shoe, you know, 2 weeks to get a product, I'm more than likely going to say, if it's going to take that long, I'll go down and pay extra to go and buy it off a shelf somewhere.
So you got to, in a way, the hardest part now is identifying what is... what's the choke point in the funnel? Because what you're saying reminds me of, so this week, every month we'll go down and visit my parents-in-law. They live down in Martha Cove.
Right.
And it's my father-in-law's 70th birthday this weekend, and we got him like, I don't know if you've ever heard of July Luggage, but it's sort of a newer roller company, very well designed. They've got inbuilt chargers, etc.
All right.
And they're a very strong e-commerce business where they own a lot of their supply chain and manufacturing.
Yeah.
But a lot of the last mile stuff that you were just talking about, they own. So the biggest one that I didn't even think about until they told us the delivery time was monogramming. So we wanted letters monogrammed on the case. Now the case and the colour, they're going to have in any warehouse. Like it's pretty easy. But getting that monogram, if it was back in China versus here, would extend that wait time out by weeks.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the stuff that I think you're
Well, I think that's where we would go. So we're going to this really lean supply chain where you manufacture, you do any value adds offshore at the cheaper value add point, and then you bring it into Australia ready to go, and it's literally like a flow through in Australia. So you're trying to get a highly unionised, expensive person in a warehouse to touch it as little as you can, and try and get it to the store level as quickly as you can. And so that doesn't work with e-commerce. You know, you're trying to pick through to find the pink one or the green one or whatever, and they're just not built for it. So it is putting huge pressure. No one's got the right answer yet, and then you say, well, is it just a blip on the process, and will we just go straight back to lean supply chain? And no, I don't think so. I think the consumer's changed. My mother, I think I've said it a few times now, got a PayPal account, and she's 72. That should scare the hell out of everyone. That she's just sitting there ordering. And I think retail becomes more an experience than a transaction. So the retail end will be more, come and touch and feel and do stuff.
Yeah, and something that guarantees those margins. And I think last mile is a key component of that, which will change supply chains a lot. Like I said, with that case, it should arrive today, actually. I couldn't believe it. We ordered it Friday. It's funny because we actually interviewed the CMO of July Luggage last week, who's a good friend. She sort of joined in on this new series where we interview marketers at disruptive brands, and we hit her up, and she's like, "Yeah, it'll be done Wednesday." I'm like, Jesus, this is just ridiculous. But a lot of people, like you said, alcohol is still one of those areas, and the only options you've got are unfortunately these Uber Eats type services, which add so much margin that it almost makes it untenable and not worthwhile, and you prefer to just not buy it. Yeah. And that's the customer experience. So,
but it also extends, like you talk about them owning the supply chain. We talk about our customers having their product thrown across the fence. When when the Australia Post guy comes, he just throws it in. That is actually an extension of the company. So we already saw it in the UK beforehand, where people were controlling their supply chain in the last mile, would come and install it, or would come and deliver it and make sure it's correct, because that's your only touch point with that retailer is the driver.
Yeah.
So we are seeing a whole changing of what's acceptable practice, and I think what we're seeing at the moment is just mad rush, get shit out. Yeah. It's not what we're going to see. We're going to see a touch point and consumer, a better consumer experience.
Yeah, better service. I think in that particular component. That's going to be very interesting because my partner and I are fascinated by Japan. I don't know why. It's just like we got interested in the food. We went on a holiday there, and we've now been there 3-4 times. And their service experience is unbelievable, particularly mail delivery, like packages is like ridiculous. They're so professional, and you would never experience something like that with people tossing packages. So that'll be very interesting over the next couple of years.